Woo! We got through 2020 and we are in 2021. And what better way to start this new year than to see all of your faces? I'm so happy to see you guys, and I'm happy you're joining us for our therapy break today. So for those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Anissa Mitchell and I'm with PMD Alliance. I'm the Vice President of Programs. I'm very excited to welcome you to our very first program for the new year, kicking it off right with the therapy break. We have a very exciting and unique program today that I'm going to launch into here in a few minutes, but just a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to have an interactive program, but we're going to keep you muted until towards the end so that if you have some questions for our speakers, you can unmute yourselves and ask them, but we're going to keep you muted until then just so we don't have any background noise. If you don't want to speak up, but you want to say something, make a comment, or ask a question, then you can scroll down to the bottom and open up your chat box and chat your questions, and I will take care of that for you. So you've got a couple of options. Yes, we are recording and it will be up on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and watch it, you can do that. If you want to share it with somebody that maybe you think might benefit from it or missed out today, feel free to share that. So we're always loving it when we get new people joining in, thanks to our attendees. So I'm going to introduce our two speakers. We actually have two speakers today. We have Catherine Strisik, and am I saying that name right?
Strisik.
Okay. Yeah. I don't like mispronouncing. Hugh is an author and a poet who's won several awards, as well as she's a care partner to her husband. She wrote a book called The Mistress, which is the personification of Parkinson's, which was awarded the New Mexico Book Award for poetry in 2017. She was also a winner of Parkinson's Life 2019 poetry competition. And she is a co-founder and consulting editor of Tao's Journal of International Poetry and Art. With her is another author. This is Robert Silver, and he's a psychologist by training. He's a storyteller by inclination, and by chance, he is also a person with Parkinson's. And he has also written a book called Living Well, or Keeping On Living Well with Parkinson's Disease, and has written several op-eds and has been involved in various contributions to anthologies. So he's very well read and written as well. So we're very excited to have them. What we're going to do today is we're going to have Robert and Catherine share little excerpts from their book. And they're coming from completely different perspectives and written in different formats, but very real emotion that you're gonna hear and feel through their written prose and poetry. And I think that's something that we can all connect to. Bibliotherapy is a form of therapy that some people find to be beneficial to kind of release emotion that may be difficult to put into words, and gives you an opportunity to express yourself. So this is one way that they've expressed their experience. So they didn't come here to listen to me. So Robert and Catherine, would you spend just a couple of minutes before we actually launch into your readings, giving us a little bit more background about you and how you got into this and where you are today and how you two met?
Okay, Robert.
Start, Catherine.
I guess I can say, well, Robert, my late husband had Parkinson's disease. So, and he passed away. It's just coming up on 5 years now this month. So he lived quite incredibly strong as somebody with Parkinson's. He had it, he was diagnosed, he was with it for 7 years, which was a short time considering you can go on for 20, 30 years with Parkinson's, but he ended up having a massive stroke. So that was that. that. So and I know Robert and Larry knew each other, and Robert can explain how. But yeah, it's funny, if I ever used the word caretaker, or if he heard it, he'd get really mad. He said, "You're not caretaking me." Anyway, it's a definition that I think some people struggle with, but I wrote this book. It's called The Mistress, and the mistress is the personification of Parkinson's disease. So I wrote this out of a kind of my own frenzy and mania that I was in as things became complicated with medications. And kept a journal probably from day one of diagnosis about everything that went on for 7 years. So from that, the poetry started to come. And anyway, so that's what I'll say for now. But thank you all for being here, because it's amazing, and I applaud everybody who's in this incredible world of Parkinson's, because it's really beautiful in so many ways. So, okay, Robert.
Yeah, this book that I'm going to do some reading from is entitled "Keeping On: Living Well with Parkinson's Disease," and it is the book that although I've written a lot of things since I retired from practicing clinical and forensic psychology, this is the book that I did not want to write, and I refused to write about Parkinson's for years, essentially because it already had invaded so much of my consciousness, and I don't know how to write about something without thinking about it. And I was darned if I was going to grant it any more, if I was going to voluntarily grant it any more space in my thinking. It just had occupied too much space involuntarily already. But there was a serendipitous event that convinced me that I had to write about it, and maybe we'll talk more about that later. But anyway, that's how I came to write this, and I feel honored that you're here to listen to me read some of it today. I always feel honored whenever anybody listens to anything I have to say or reads anything I've written. I feel especially honored, though, to have you hear these words, because they come pretty much directly from my heart. Well, without much further ado then, how am I moving? Medicine kicked in? Will it last through this reading, funeral, dinner, round of golf, concert, conversation? How much longer till I can eat something without blocking the medicine's uptake? When is the next dose? It's Parkinson's disease, and along with a million other Americans, I've got it. I'm mired in the fight of my life for the quality of my life. There is no cure, at least not yet. But I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I have no use for sympathy or pity. Among those my age, everybody has something. Some struggle with life-threatening conditions. Mine is not one of them. I'm more likely to die with Parkinson's than from it. It's more constant pain in the ass, forcing itself upon me, distorting and coloring my every move. I should say every intended move, since I can't reliably make my body do what I wish it to do. It's like an oppositional child dragging its feet in response to a parental demand. Those are the opening paragraphs from the prelude to Keeping On. And what I'd like to do is to read an excerpt from the first chapter, which is entitled A Tale of Two Bodies. It's my attempt to put into words a day in the life, essentially. What it's like when my medicine is working well, and what it's like when I don't have medicine in me, or whether it's not being effective. Anyway, this is an excerpt from the first chapter, A Tale of Two Bodies. I'm again awake far too early. It's between 3 and 5 a.m. I'm in the depths of Parkinsonian near paralysis. All movement is protracted slow motion effort. My balance and coordination are severely compromised. Even the most minimal motion demands my total concentration and planning. I'll need a repeated cocktail of medicines just to get through the day. At this moment, I'm like one of those snakes you see on asphalt roadways, warming their bodies in their cold blood in order to move. Drugs are my asphalt roadway equivalent. At 5 o'clock, I'll begin a repeated medication cycle. But for now, I must shuffle through the darkness alone and without pharmaceutical assistance. I inch my way to the edge of our king-size bed. I rely on a nightlight's faint glow and on moonlight filtering into our bedroom to find my way. I move my frozen limbs beyond the edge of the bed and push myself up to a seated position. My legs hang down toward the floor. I feel around for the iPad I positioned the previous evening when I had more control of my body. It's my link to humanity as I await the return of my ability to move. But for now, I must make my way medication-free across the enormous seeming distance to our bathroom. I'm finally standing next to the bed, clutching the iPad to my chest. I reach out into the darkness with my free arm for support of the chair just beyond the nightstand. I shuffle my bare feet from floor tile to floor tile, feeling each successive grout line. Each marks another 13 inches of progress to my goal. At last, I reach the bathroom doorway. Twisting my body through the opening, I feel around for the door handle and then for the vanity counter. I close the door behind me and switch on the bathroom lights. The clock on the counter reads 4:39 a.m. Still 21 minutes to the 5 a.m. witching hour, when powerful pharmaceuticals can begin their work. I'll swallow a handful of pills just to get moving. Once the medication reaches its full effectiveness, I'll likely have some 2 hours of relatively normal appearing movement prior to the next required dose. And I'll repeat this 3-hour medication cycle over the next 15 hours. I keep one hand on the vanity counter as I pocket the pill case, prepared the previous evening, and make my way to the toilet in urgently required relief. It's finally 5 o'clock, and I can begin recharging my depleted neurotransmitters. I grasp a waiting water glass, open the pill case, and remove 2 Stilivos, 3 Requips, an Azilect, and 1/2 of an amantadine tablet. I focus my full attention on the pills to be sure I've got the correct combination. Down the 7 pills and reconfirm the time. I'll still have to wait an hour for the medication to kick in. I'm sleep deprived and impatient as I wait for the medication to take effect, hoping another urgent toilet excursion won't be needed in the interim. I eye the clock, willing the time to pass and the medicine to work. But time moves excruciatingly slowly. It's now 5:40. Perhaps the medicine's been in my system long enough for me to make my way back to bed. As the day proceeds, I continue my clock watching, juggling my time, meals, dissipated activity, sometimes appearing impatient to the uninformed. This is the structure of a life lived in 3-hour blocks of drug-dependent time. Though I sometimes joke about the many pills I take, I'm damn fortunate that they manage my symptoms as well as they do. They allow me to hike, bike, ski, snowshoe, play tennis, sail, and even dance. I'm equally fortunate that I have the resources to obtain them. Indeed, without excellent insurance coverage, the cost would be upwards of $20,000 a year. Nevertheless, it's an odd, if not bizarre, existence, this yo-yoing back and forth between periods of near immobility and times when I look almost normal. The question of which body I'll inhabit at any given instant is always with me. When the medication is fully effective, I'm like Clark Kent, donning his Superman costume and radically changing his identity. I'm near hyperactive, moving from place to place rapidly and almost gracefully. Since I can't predict the drug's effectiveness from one moment to the next, I feel compelled to pack in all that I can prior to the next inevitable crash. At the end of the day, I've come full circle. I'm emotionally and physically depleted. As I get into bed, I sense the medication wearing off. Without drugs, my mobility will continue to diminish until morning, when the cycle will begin again. I use what mobility I still possess to arrange tomorrow's pills. Lights out, as if in some slapstick comedy, I must first free my arm, the one I've managed to pin beneath the weight of my own body. Gone are the days of her reliable body's graceful overture. A fierce war continually rages within me. I drift off ruminating on an open question. With the coming dawn, which of the bodies that vie for dominion will prevail? Will it be the body of mobility or the body of paralysis? The body of my dreams or the body of my nightmares? Catherine.
Thanks, Robert. So I'm reading in between Robert's readings. I'm going to read two poems in between his essays. So unsure as to this diagnosis, why it came about, but thinking it was because of the inhalation of insecticides while Larry was working on the Thai-Cambodian border back in 1980. So many of the poems in this book are persona poems. So they're in the voice of other. They could be in the voice of the mistress herself, Mount Kilimanjaro. This poem is in the voice of the insecticide. Paraquat, insecticide, speaks. I'm as immune to prayer as to whom or what ingests me. Man, woman, insect, animal, plant, deplete, darken, wither, die. Inside his brain's deepest vault, I am progressive, slow, aggressive, the nervous system. My earliest sign, loss of the sensuous sense of smell, twitch, muscle ache, need to sleep before my secret exposes a disease so hungry we scream, ego driven. He eats against betrayal. Even if he had one ear open to his Lord, he still would be mine. The wife is Parkinson's. She says an inarticulated waltz haunts deep within his mid-brain. In tongues, there is terrible light. He says he loves her clavicle, her ankles, their mirroring textures asymmetric with a comma. He holds binoculars. His nerve cells already starved when she notices the inarticulation, his arm not swinging now. Their waltz reveals gestures depletion of dopamine plus grace plus tiptoes plus another Tai Chi pose. The horse already has galloped. Everywhere this haunt seizes him, black substance slowed, degeneration in his not so quiet tremor. Clearly an inarticulated trembling during and after this untimely waltz and taunt, the taint catches your breath. How's your, he never grows tired of this, his rounding in articulate breath between their pillows. Puccini is not obliterated, yet violins and their faces. Robert.
There are very few good things I can say about Parkinson's disease. So I'm surprised that I can say anything good about it, but one thing that is good about it is that it continually reminds me of how generous and compassionate and decent my fellow human beings are. I can absolutely count on the fact that whenever I'm out in public, if I'm struggling, there's always one or more strangers who will immediately come to my aid and will do anything within their power to help me. I usually decline their offer, but I'm terribly grateful for it. And it reminds me of just how decent and compassionate our fellow human beings can be. Anyway, what I'd like to do is to read another brief excerpt from one of the other chapters in the book. This one is entitled, "But for the Kindness of Strangers." And it goes back a few years. Diane and I, we live in New Mexico, but I grew up on the East Coast in New York, and we were back east visiting with some of my childhood friends. And we'd come back into New York City and had driven. It was just a beautiful day, Sunday afternoon to Midtown Manhattan. And suddenly there was traffic gridlock. And I left New York 50 years ago. And so I'm no longer a native New Yorker and I don't really know how to get things done. But anyway, we unload our rental car after we finally find a way to drop it off. And this is where the story picks up. Yesterday, my small rolling suitcase glided across LaGuardia Airport's crowded concourses. It's now met its match in the assortment of fissures and fractures in the city's aged sidewalks. The small suitcase seems to have an uncanny knack for finding and binding in every crevice along our meandering route. It's difficult to determine whether the bag's wheels are easing or intensifying my load. Overdressed for the Indian summer temperature, I'm perspiring profusely. I struggle to proceed amid the swirling scrum of humanity. The number and press of motor vehicles and pedestrians seems to rise with every few yards of progress. Finally, we reach a 9th Avenue southbound bus stop. Diane has located a ticket kiosk, but we lack either the exact change or a required Metro card, so the bus option evaporates. So here we are at one of the most intimidating intersections in the Western world, me almost immobilized, and Diane seeming at least a bit overwhelmed. My frustration with my halting movement is approaching its zenith. A bystander has noticed our burgeoning bewilderment and ineptness. I had glimpsed a 40-ish woman sitting on a low masonry wall, eating a slice of pizza and chatting with a man of roughly the same age. She'd been casually observing and evaluating our situation. She calls out to us, "Where are you trying to get to?" Diane replies with the address of the rental apartment. "You need a taxi," she declares. Nodding in my direction, she observes, "He ain't walking to no 8th Avenue and 28th Street. You're never getting a taxi on your own. I'm going to get you one." She adds, "My name's Yvonne. I don't want nothing from you. I don't want your money. I don't want nothing. He can take all the time he needs," she adds, gesturing in my direction. And with that, we are in Yvonne's care. Her New Yorker's eye has sized up the intersection swirl of people and flow of taxi traffic. "We've got to get over there," she asserts. Pointing diagonally across the intersection, this will require crossing two major traffic clogged streets, first 9th Avenue and then 42nd Street. The prospect of navigating these two traffic arteries is unnerving. Digital timers halt the flow of onrushing traffic for 20 seconds. That's more than sufficient time for an average pedestrian, but it's unlikely to be enough time for me. To focus my attention on safely putting one foot in front of the other and not being distracted by Diane's and Yvonne's progress, I tell them, "You head across and I'll follow." They seem ambivalent about leaving me, but they're caught up in the challenge of safely negotiating the crossings. I've left them with little alternative but to proceed. They make their way across 9th Avenue as I labor to launch myself to the momentarily navigable intersection. The timer reaches 0. and I've merely managed to step off the curb into the street. I will myself back onto the sidewalk, waiting for the timing device to recycle. Through the crowd, I can now see Diane and Yvonne on the opposite side of 9th Avenue. Preparing to make their way across 42nd Street, they repeatedly glance back in my direction, powerless to assist me. Like a runner in starting blocks, I'm preparing myself for release into the challenge that I will immediately face. My attention is fixed on the crossing timer's countdown cycle. It flashes 20 and I launch myself into the pack of pedestrians who step as one into the intersection crosswalk. I am now like slow-moving flotsam carried in a faster flowing stream. Pedestrians glide past the eddy formed in the flow by my sluggish pace. The timer is almost at 0. I've yet to reach the relative safety of the far shore sidewalk. Within yards of my curbside destination, I become almost motionless. Traffic will soon be bearing down on me. A young woman steps into the street in my direction, distress and concern writ large on her face. "Let me help you," she says, reaching simultaneously for my arm and my luggage. She deftly and mercifully extracts me from the approaching vehicles. "Thanks so much," I tell her as she hurriedly melts back into the anonymity of the crowd. I'm now faced with the prospect of the 42nd Street crossing. Diane and Yvonne are across the intersection waiting for me. Once again, the timer signals my next uncertain foray. Once again, I arrive some yards short of the safety of my sidewalk destination as the timer reaches 0. A bus is inching toward me as I furiously struggle the final few yards. I'm at the mercy of the driver's skill, patience, and judgment as I slowly shuffle forward over the remaining bit of ground towards safety. A man reaches out of the crowd for me, guiding me and assuring my safe foothold on the sidewalk. I'm reunited with Diane and Yvonne at last. Yvonne reiterates her commitment to our care. "We'll get one of those taxis to stop. Want me to take your suitcase? There's a better chance at a taxi just up the street. You just take your time. You need to stop and rest? No hurry." Yvonne and I carry on a truncated conversation as we slowly make our way up the block. I begin to tell her about my Parkinson's disease and the current failure of usually effective medicine. "Your wife told me," she interjects. She repeats her earlier offers and reassurances. "Do you need rest? You want me to wheel your suitcase? You sure you don't want me to take it from you?" "We're in no hurry," she repeats. "Thanks, but I need to manage the suitcase myself," I reply. Yvonne appears puzzled by my rejection of her offer. I tell her, if I quit now, there's no telling what else I may give up on. "You giving up don't look real likely to me," she comments. Finally, we reach the point Yvonne has chosen to make our stand. She instructs us to wait as she steps off the curb, hand raised, seeking the attention of passing taxis. Although we are no longer in close competition with the other ride seekers, most of the passing cabs are already occupied. The first 2 taxis Yvonne stops refuse to take us. The trip is probably too short to offer a worthwhile fare. I know there are rules about that, but this is New York, and we're at their mercy. Yvonne is momentarily set back, but undaunted. "I'm going to get one of those guys to take you. Don't you worry," she declares, remaining vigilant for an available unoccupied vehicle. A bit more time passes. True to her word, Yvonne has snared and commandeered a taxi. She's giving direction to its now captive driver. She hurriedly bundles Diane into the rear seat of the waiting cab. As Yvonne next takes my arm and guides me to the taxi's rear door, she commands the driver to retrieve and transfer my luggage from curbside to the vehicle's trunk. Reaching for my wallet, I implore her, "Let me give you my business card. Someday you may need help." She declines my offer. Promise made, promise kept. Diane and I are now cocooned in the relative safety of the New York City taxi. As the cab merges with the tightly packed traffic, I catch a last glimpse of Yvonne. She's back on the sidewalk monitoring our progress, confirming the successful transfer of responsibility for our care. Though she is gazing in our direction, our eyes no longer meet. Grateful as we are, we have now moved beyond the orbit of the generosity, compassion, and unbidden kindness of the stranger. A wordless sigh of relief expresses our thanks. And that's the way it goes. No matter what predicament I find myself in, there's always somebody, some generous, compassionate fellow human being who comes to my aid. And I can take that to the bank. Catherine.
Thanks, Robert. So this is another one of those poems where a persona poem. This is the neurologist speaks. And I just want to say the next two poems have to do with medication. And I think anybody who is on the taking the cocktail of medications that you have when you have Parkinson's, it's complicated. It's complicated to get started. It's complicated to monitor throughout the day. It's complicated as the years go by. And there are a lot of side effects from medications as well as benefits. The neurologist speaks. Here is the oblong pill. Here is the oblong pill. Here is the oblong pill. Although we anticipate relief of your symptoms, oh, did I not remind you each visit the last 3 years, increasing the dose, the probable side effects of disassociation? Whoops, did I say lack of impulse control? Whoops, did I not tell you all involved will collapse? Did I not tell you to watch out for an increase in your desire for sweets? So because I personified Parkinson's disease, and if you think of the definition of mistress, someone who's taking away from, and the whole seduction that can also happen because of medications. This is one of those poems that has to do with the seduction of the mistress. I'm laughing, but I wasn't laughing. Dopamine agonist, Parkinson's in chunk form. When did the whispering begin? Which hour did the mistress entertain her lips? Embracing the microphone would be so seductive and odd to the listener who cannot remove his eyes from her breath, those magenta and swollen lips. The listener, damp with abundant dopamine, rearranges his shirt for the invitation, does not think of a cool rock to lay his cheek upon. The mistress gleams with sweat, wipes her neck. In the lapse between public words, the private matters. I love you, whispered into the canals of the listener's body. How every sound hints, how each undraped phrase bargains. The listener shudders, lured by her curve. Now the whispers say seduction, and she cannot let go her whisper, the listener, all sheer affliction. Robert.
Aging is, I guess, compounded by Parkinson's in terms of the loss involved. I mean, we're essentially fighting a rear guard action, trying to hang on to as much as we can for as long as we can as we age, and even more so with Parkinson's. I'd like to read an excerpt from a chapter in the book entitled In a Season of Loss. Sometimes there are things you find amid the losses, and that's what this chapter is about. For us septuagenarians, it's a season of loss. What began as a trickle now evokes the specter of a torrent of diminished connections and possibilities. One brisk sunny fall morning in this time of loss, I'm out alone practicing serving tennis balls. Though Parkinson's disease would seem to render playing tennis unlikely, I persist. There are better days when medication supports adequate movement, and there are disappointing ones when I'm relatively immobile. Since serving does not require me to react as quickly as chasing down an opponent's shot, it offers a unique possibility for gaining competitive advantage. Nothing happens in a tennis match until the ball is served. In this instant, I alone am in control of the point. Though serve placement and pace require timing and coordination, these skills are more manageable for me than the instantaneous reading and reacting essential to other aspects of the game. It's routine for me to practice serving prior to my weekly lesson in mixed doubles play. My friend Maureen drives her car into the parking area adjacent to my practice court. Former next door neighbors, she and her husband, and my wife and I have been friends for over a dozen years. Over the months, I've casually noted Maureen's routine. Arriving for her regular physical therapy appointments at the spa where we are members, she typically seeks a remote shaded parking space adjacent to my practice court. We usually wave or nod in acknowledgement of one another, but this day brings something different. Maureen alters her routine. Instead of walking toward the spa's entrance, she heads in the opposite direction, straight toward me. She reaches the chain link fence separating us. She's obviously on a mission. Her determined demeanor makes it clear she has something to say. Enter her practice and go over to the fence-bordered courtside area where she has paused. She declares, "While you've been out here taking tennis lessons and practicing, you've also been teaching the rest of us. Watching you week after week, we've been learning from you. You've been showing us how to face illnesses that may be in store for us. You've taught us about courage. I've wanted to tell you that." Startled and a bit embarrassed, I demur. "Well, I can be pretty determined," I respond. "You've demonstrated great courage," insists the spouse of a retired U.S. Marine Corps colonel. I'm at an uncharacteristic loss for words. Though flattering, her depiction is well beyond the universe of language that I would apply to myself. I managed to mumble my thanks to her for sharing this with me. With that, she raises her hand to the chain link fence between us. I reflexively mirror her movement. Our hands make contact in a void in this fence's steel mesh. She's not merely touched my hand, she's touched my heart. Within this season of loss, there is this unexpected find, something worth cherishing. I gain added strength from the knowledge that others may be watching me, rooting for me, counting on me, feeling encouraged by me. These unseen observers solidify my resolve. They had a cause beyond my own, one that obliges me to keep faith with any who might find inspiration in my actions. How could I not persist when they may be comforted by my effort? So I keep on, for them and for me. I'm unexpectedly reinvigorated as I return to tennis and resume my journey, pursuing a path amid losses that surely lie ahead. But for now, Maureen's words have added some snap to my serve. Catherine.
So interwoven in this book are poems that are called Before We Were Three, with just kind of random years, because you have to remember that there was a time before. So Before We Were Three, 1993. Our bodies contact, which means the wheat field touching or grazing the finest hairs on my body when in New Mexico, or an out of the way path when lost on Monhegan, where the grass is golden, more like hay in August during drought. And it's our chests that touch and the hay we can see through. strands of space between the light to each other's faces. It's something like an invitation when I cannot stand space any longer, when I remove your dark lenses, when the cloud above quite suddenly blocks the sun's reflections on our cheeks. This is when I want more, a finger tender against my lips, as if against could be enough to lift into sunlight through cloud, away from what feels like 100 years of urge. And then, so one of the earliest signs of Parkinson's can be the loss of the sense of smell. And it doesn't happen for everybody, but it appears that it is a very, very early sign that can be, 10, even 15 years before a diagnosis. So I address that in a few of the poems in this book. Your loss comes on like grief. My grief comes on like longing. Even the mud smells good, I say, and you say, yes, yes, along the San Cristobal Creek, where we drop to our knees, sanctuary and brilliance of soft afternoon glow, where I breathe the scent of mud, where you breathe my set of wet eyes that perhaps your eyes see, neither of us paying attention to the song loud in my heart and yours. The mud smells good, the mud smells good, glee swelling my flesh. Please breathe me in. Unexpected desire for you upon my lips, an hour's reflection of creek flow during early spring, open, somehow quiet in its appetite. I am a scentless woman to you and to her too. That the mud smells good, that I want you to say, I remember. Robert.
This last excerpt that I'd like to read is about, I guess, the fact that any of us who have any degree of success in living well with Parkinson's, we don't do this alone. We do it with people who love and care for us, who minister to our medical needs, and it's a community of sorts that help us keep on keeping on. The title of this chapter is Too Soon Taken, and this relates to a relationship lost along the way. My friendship with Larry was not among his longest or strongest, nor was it one of his nearest or dearest. Nevertheless, it likely occupied a special place among the relationships of his life. Our shared histories, Jewish men of similar age, born in the Bronx, having had long careers in helping professions, and now nascent writers, might easily have been the basis for the deeper friendship we were sidling up to. Many, sidle up to relationships, they don't go for them directly. So anyway, some few months earlier, we exchanged drafts of our memoirs, perhaps in an unlabeled effort to hasten this process. But it was Parkinson's disease, our common adversary, that propelled a special connection. Involuntarily conscripted into this group, we were automatic allies. Our bond was forged with reciprocal efforts to support and encourage one another, and refusing to submit to our relentless foe. To hell with Parkinson's disease were Larry's recurring words. And now he is suddenly gone. A massive stroke has claimed my fellow warrior. Over 1,000 miles from home, I'm awash in grief and disbelief. He was 5 years younger, had counted on our partnership in the Parkinson's Iliad that lay before us. older and longer ago diagnosed, I assumed I would be the first to go. With macabre irony, I recall a recent conversation with Larry regarding our ultimate demise. Perhaps motivated by a wish to encourage, a friend of his had naively implied that having Parkinson's conveyed immunity to other diseases. At least you know what you've got, his friend had said. Larry and I laughed about it, once again recalling an old saying among physicians, just because you have ticks doesn't mean you can't have fleas. In Larry's case, the saying was prophetic. Parkinson ticks were ultimately trumped by killer fleas in the form of a massive hemorrhagic stroke. It instantly confiscated any possibility of the quality of a life that he wished to live. 6 days later, it took life itself. Diane and I barely arrived back home in time to be present at the community's celebration of Larry's life. Attended by easily 1,000 fellow mourners, it included a video of him reading the essay that is the final chapter of his memoir. Many months earlier, Diane and I had been in the standing room only audience for the original reading of that essay titled The Other Side. It had been the concluding piece for the evening and was greeted with sustained, enthusiastic applause. As Diane and I slowly headed for the exit, Larry spotted us and made his way to us through the scrum of well-wishers. Drawing near, he confided that my having previously written about my Parkinson's battle had encouraged him to read his Parkinson's piece in public. He added, "I read this for you." His unanticipated declaration brought me close to tears. It still does. Larry had no way of knowing that I had ambivalently scheduled an attempt to follow his lead early the next morning with an effort to summit Taos Ski Valley's 13,161-foot elevation Wheeler Peak. Deeply uncertain as to my ability to reach the Wheeler summit, I began the trek as planned the following day. Larry's words from the prior evening stayed with me, filling me with determination to do my best to reach this unlikely goal for someone with Parkinson's disease. I'll never really know what he intended in his words for me the night before. Nevertheless, I felt inspired by his example. If he had done it, perhaps I could too. This was not a competition. Rather, it was the experienced encouragement of one battle-tested brother for another. I did, in fact, reach the summit that day. Had Larry known of my plan, he would have been pulling for me, as I would have been pulling for him. My continued journey with Parkinson's is lonelier and harder without it. He was taken far too soon. Larry is Catherine's late husband. Catherine.
Thank you. So I have two more poems, and then I think that we'll have a Q&A. Deaths occurred outside my window the morning I was slanted by the universe in another direction. Dear mourning doves, I bury your bodies in the compost pile. I speak first to the larger of you, now disfigured in afterlife, fine white and gray feathers close. I say, here is my dream for you to dream. Here is my iris and my thigh, and for the smaller of you, neck contorted far to the right, your one remaining eye bulging as if filled with your mate. I say longing, beginning with a coup. I don't want to write about your tendons stretched, your unpretty beaks, resins under my portal, how my mouth becomes weak and salted, why I did not hear your end of life screech, how being a dove also means the earth is windswept with magenta language. And I'm going to end with this poem that this was an experience at Lake Como. Hotel Belvedere, and the wife whispers, I am afraid here in our bed, where your right foot and toes tingle with nerve pain, where we do not sleep close anymore, where we do not sleep often anymore. The November moon, one night away from full, choking me. The moon far from ordinary, radiating its sureness. Even so, I am capable of music. I hear Kathy, smooth and as startled as nakedness startles even myself when discovered between floral sheets. When the moon this month makes us pay attention in a way we do not ordinarily. Nakedness that you do not during the night feel because we are three homes away from each other. Believe me, please, when I say there is nothing here in my shadow, there is everything. Your nerve endings hurt even my heart. Tell me, tell me, do you hear my brokenness as the wife, your Parkinson's urges? Here at Hotel Belvedere, where we try to sleep together again. She's here, undisguised, quietless, trembling, and your toes, you say, burn. I hear triangular moan. Tell me that you love in this darkness of our bed that has become my lichen bed, where I lie with the 2 full moon and a stranger. I'll tell you now, this is me touching her. These years of sharing you with your mistress, her petty, low-grade way of bodily encounters with the two of us, the translucent lace curtains billowing in and out, because even in November, I sleep open, bound, you might say, with the mistress, I say, who is to blame for this night's audience. And if I understand the concerto, this highest key that aches, I might tell you why this audience applauds. Thank you.
Wow. People are applauding you, even though you can't hear them. I have to say, that was extraordinarily moving. I don't even know what to say because it was just so moving. You guys articulated so many different experiences and emotions in a way that somebody who's walking that same journey can totally relate to, and somebody who's not can totally relate to. Emotionally, viscerally, like that was a visceral experience for me. I would love if anyone wants to unmute themselves, if we can enable that for people, if they want to make a comment or a question or whatever. I would love to hear from our audience. And yes, you are capable now to unmute if you would like to say something to either Robert or Catherine.
I just thought it was really beautiful the way that you both built your stories, your individual stories. And then I just didn't see it coming, Robert, when you started to talk. And then as soon as you said stroke, I made that connection and saw how your lives were intertwined. You know, that was so moving and so beautiful the way that you did that. And then you come and you tell and you finish. I just love how you've shared your poetry together.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to make a statement or ask a question of either of our speakers today? We get a lot of lot of comments about how you just are so moving. What you're saying is profound, and they really relate to it, respond to it. But you're welcome to speak up.
Catherine, did you write poetry prior to this book?
Yes. Yeah, this was my second book, and yes, I've been writing poetry a long time.
And Catherine is the poet laureate of Taos, New Mexico.
I see somebody named Robert has.
Roger
Jenkins.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to try and do this without crying, but I don't think I can. I'm battling my second stroke for 15 years. I have to confess, I got this in the mail today.
Oh,
It is because I submitted a lot of names on Instagram telling them about PMDA is the best. And I was opening the UPS box and I saw I was going to be late for the meeting. And I hit panic and I froze. So I got down on my hands and knees and crawled from my living room to my office to get on the computer. And I was hoping I didn't wake him up. It was worth the crawl. To you, Robert, and to you, Catherine. I felt like I was inside your book, jumping up and down. Thank you both. It was worth the crawl.
And it was worth the 5 years of my life that it took to write this book and get it published. The kind of reaction that you offer makes those 5 years worthwhile.
Can we have the name and publisher, please?
The name of the book is Keeping On, Living Well with Parkinson's Disease. The publisher of my book is Nighthawk Press. It's also available on Amazon, in both digital and print format.
Can we get that info with this meeting notes?
yeah, I think we'll have one of our teammates put that in the chat so you guys can link to it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Roger, for coming to this reading.
I wouldn't miss it. I wasn't going to miss.
We only have another minute. Does anybody else want to say anything or ask a question before we close out the day?
I wanted to say something,
Please.
but I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah.
I have the privilege of living in Taos, New Mexico with both Catherine and Robert. And I just want to say, it makes me cry to hear how articulate they are about what this has meant to them and how they're coping with it. It is a gift for us all. And I can't say with deeper feeling how much I appreciate their courage and their articulate, wonderful literature. Having read Bob's book, I was reminded again of how moved I was when I first read it. And this day was as moving as that. Thank you both for the life you give to Taos.
And now to all of us, this can be seen by anybody anywhere now. So I thank you. I think that was a perfect way. Thank you, Mary, for sharing that, and a perfect way for us to thank our speakers today for such an incredible and moving program, sharing your hearts and your souls through your words in ways that many of us can't do, but totally relate to. So thank you so much for spending the time and sharing that with us today. I thank everyone for coming today. I know we all feel a little bit emotional, but I think it's very inspiring. And I just want to inspire you all to find that one thing that, maybe helps you to express yourself. It may not be writing, it could be anything, but you're all warriors. So thank you so much, Robert. Thank you so much, Catherine. And if you are not on your camera, maybe turn your camera on now so we can do our wave. And this one is a special one, a wave to Robert and Catherine and everybody out there. Thank you so very much for joining us today. We will have it up on YouTube soon, so you can share it. And we will see you again in our next program. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.